You've probably found yourself watching a tournament stream, admiring the homies as they toss out fist bumps in between rounds, taking a quick look at their desks, and wondered, quite understandably, why are their keyboards so freaking tilted? The crazy thing is that it almost doesn't matter what shooter you're watching. CSGO, Valorant, Siege, Overwatch, hell, even Fortnite. Virtually every aimer worth their salt can be spotted rotating their keyboard to various degrees of insanity.
So like I can play like this.
Crouching? You see? I'm still aligned.
How do people play like this? This feels so bad.
The question, again, is why? From maximizing space, to improving focus, to gaining access to additional keys, competitors have spent well over a decade experimenting with and touting the benefits of tilting. What started as a result of necessity has since become the standard for FPS's sickest, sweatiest savants. But does angling your elbow really make you better? Or is it just some silly, outdated posture that edgy e-gamers adopt for show? Also, is it kind of like really bad for you? Okay, so before we start cranking our elbows into some truly cursed configurations, do me a favor and one tap that thumbs up, spray transfer your way on over to the subscribe button, and finish things off by USPing those notifications on. Was that lame? That felt really lame.
Like, super lame.
Alright, look, I know I talk a lot of smack about League of Legends players, but if that is honestly the only esport you watch, there's a very decent chance that this is the first you've ever heard of players tilting their keys at weird inclines. How steep are said inclines? Well, it depends. Some are slight, some are this. So how did it start? Well, it's hard to say for certain, since keyboard tilting seems to be one of those things that's just as old as FPS itself. You see, back in the day, we boomers weren't equipped with adjustable RGBified desks the size of workbenches and desk mats the size of those who use them. No. What we had were dingy, decrepit school tables that our parents made us repurpose from the nearest curb. And they made us carry that shit home, too. Uphill, both ways, in a snowstorm, while doing our chores. The worst that you had to deal with was mommy limiting your screen time so you couldn't play Minecraft on the iPad before attending the Fortnite concert. F***ing Zoomers.
Dimitri might be an elitist boomer, but for once, I have to agree with him.
Anyway, gross exaggerations aside, most of esports' greatest groundbreakers did actually cut their teeth on some scuffed ass setups. Look at Stewie, for instance. Dude literally spent his high school years hitting op flicks in a frickin' drawer. Or North American Dota divinity Fear, whose rickety TI1 era ensemble has become not only a meme, but a measure of how hard he had to hustle to make his career work.
So I didn't have a monitor, so I went to my friend and he had a spare CRT monitor, so I got that. And then obviously I have 2 books here to punch that up so I can actually see the monitor, so it's kind of a ghetto setup.
What such setups engendered, of course, is a profound lack of space. And when your esport of choice is a tactical shooter, that can be a massive problem. Why? Sensitivity. Unlike MOBAs, RTSs, and arena shooters, TAC shooters are pretty much the one esport in which lower sensitivities tend to dominate. The first of such shooters was, of course, Counter-Strike, a quiet, unforgiving slugfest in which every movement, every shot mattered. There were, of course, maniacs, like Hiko, whose solution to the small desk and/or pad dilemma was to run an absurdly high sensitivity. Turkish opera Waksik took this to an extreme, solving his admittedly awful space issues by fragging out at an unthinkable 2400 EDPI.
It's Greek versus Zorp, and precise as always. It was 6 in a row, and he's got 2 in a row! 4! damn hungry here. He's had his dinner. And he's got 5! It doesn't matter where they come from. Tarek couldn't do a thing, and Watsick is a beast.
But for the overwhelming majority of competitors, foregoing a stable, consistent, reasonable sensitivity wasn't an option. Unfortunately, this presented a real issue, since back in the day, tournament setups were way worse than they are today. Players were stuffed like sardines onto stages that looked like they'd been the stomping grounds of a Microsoft reveal panel circa 1995. Ask any player who's really been around, and they'll tell you some bone-chilling stories about the conditions in which they've competed. So, in an effort to make the most out of the meager, miserable space they were afforded, they did the stupidest, silliest, most effective thing they could think of. Tilt that shit.
And now, the guy who actually knows what he's talking about. Presented by AMD.
Hold on, this is a segment? And somebody bought it? You're telling me that AMD wanted to sponsor me making fun of Dimitri? Like, the AMD, the semiconductor company. Like, Radeon graphics and my favorite processors, AMD? As a tech guy, that's something I can get behind. While esports as a whole is still relatively new, desk manufacturers catering to esports is an even newer development. In the late 90s and early 2000s, it was difficult to find a desk purpose-built for a modern home computer, let alone one that had competitive gaming in mind. But that isn't the case anymore. We've seen innovations from large adjustable height desks, monitor arms that flex in every direction, and chairs with more engineering than a space shuttle. Young gamers today are free to adopt nearly any sitting position, and specifically keyboard positioning, that feels comfortable to them. Which means, all the more reason to give it some thought. How you position your keyboard has some pretty far-reaching effects on your muscles, joints, and tendons, from your fingers, all the way up to your shoulders, neck, and back. But I'm getting ahead of myself. We have an actual ergonomics expert who's going to be able to explain this way better than I can. And with physical therapists and ergonomics experts finding homes at some of the biggest esports orgs, we're likely going to continue to see the refinement of sitting positions and keyboard tilt. Wouldn't it be nice not to have to worry about the inordinate amount of space your esports players take up with their gaudy, indulgent peripheral setups? Oh wait, that's just console esports. Imagine only needing desk space for a monitor, console, and some sort of audio hardware. While even I can't argue that the controller is a superior aiming peripheral when pitted against a mouse and keyboard, when it comes to esports tournament setups, especially open tournaments with dozens or even hundreds of teams, everyone in a console event is essentially competing with the same amount of body positioning freedom they enjoy at home. I'm glad AMD recognized where the real brains of this show is. But please, Dimitri, feel free to get into the specific ways that mouse and keyboard players have struggled against the very peripherals they worship, only to get first rounded at a local LAN because they don't have 10 feet of desk space.
Now, keep in mind, this was eons before small, concise, 60 or 75% boards became a thing. These poor bastards were run in full sizes, which meant that depending on how hard on the paint they went, they could actually be freeing up a ton of space. Which leads us to our sort of central guiding question. How many kinds of tilt are there? And how much is too much? Needless to say, there are literally hundreds of angles at which your switchboard can be slanted, including negative ones. So let's narrow it down to the most popular. For starters, you've got your classic run-of-the-mill straight edge. Catch your key loading into the knife round, baby, because it has got zero tilt. This is the style that I use, since A, I played Dota for a decade, and B, I like how it keeps my pinky situated naturally beneath my ring finger. Next, you've got your slight 5-degree tilt. This, I would venture, is the most widespread angle you'll ever see an FPS enthusiast adopt. It gives your thumb easier access to the C and V keys, while also allowing your pinky to press Control without stretching that shit out. Now here's where things get sweatier. We'll call this one the 45, since it's situated roughly halfway between 0 and 90 degrees. Finger-wise, the benefits are pretty much the same as the 5-degree, plus you get the added desk space we talked about earlier. Of course, if you want to be a true e-gamer, you're gonna have to throw a post-plant 5v2 and go on a near full 90-degree tilt. painful and awkward as it may appear, there are actually plenty of accomplished aimers who've made it their trademark. From Shaiko to Tarek to Tifu.
Do you run out of mouse space on LAN games? Yes, I do. So like I can play like this, and then I have this much room. And like this, dude. It's just like...
Sorry, out of respect, I want to make sure that our boy Colton is keeping up with all this Keeb talk. You nodding off there, champ? You want us to run a video with some COD bros screaming at each other to waken you up a little bit?
Go ahead, Dimitri.
So, what are the upsides to adopting such a radical posture? Well, and it's gonna sound like I'm joking, but I'm not. It puts you in the zone. Tilting your keyboard to that degree forces you to hoist your entire elbow on your desk, which, as you'll hear FPS coach Ron Rambo Kim talk about in a second, weirdly allows you to really focus up.
And with the forward lean, you get the mindset of being more into the game or more immersed, if that makes sense. When I experimented with the forward lean position, I did feel like I can concentrate a little bit more on the screen in the crosshair compared to when I'm leaned back.
But wait, Dimitri, are there downsides? Yeah, no shit there are. It turns out that holding your keyboard like you're Gollum hoarding the precious can crank your shit up pretty bad. Here to walk us through said crankery is ergonomics extraordinaire Garrick Foreman, a PhD candidate at Brock University who specializes in biomechanics as they relate to esports.
Tilting your keyboard, or even without the tilting the keyboard, a lot of FPS players are always leaning forward towards the screen. They want the screen to be very close. So as soon as you start to lean into it, your spine now is flexed, which means that a lot of the musculature around your spine has to be more active to make sure that you're not falling down, basically.
Now, I know you're all 18-year-old sheesh spamming pipsqueaks who are gonna mentally check out as soon as I utter the word ergo, since, well, y'all think you're gonna live forever. But trust me when I say that ergonomics is not just boomer shit. It matters to all gamers a lot. And from what Garrick told me, the sort of traditional hunchback, make out with your monitor type stature that a lot of FPS aficionados have adopted over the years can not only have an adverse effect on your health, but your performance.
So if you are leaning forward, typically your neck has to be flexed back, extended. Your neck has to be extended up to make sure you're keeping straight on. And so what people have found from fatigue or pain in the neck is there's a drop in proprioception. And what that means is it's the body's ability to tell where it is in space. If you have neck pain, your ability to tell where your hand is without looking at it goes down. So that can lead to incorrect key presses, a slightly slower reaction time. It all can lead, I think, if you're not careful, it can lead to a lot of detrimental effects to performance.
Now, that's not to say that bending your board is always a bad thing. For starters, it really can give you access to some crazy configurations. Orienting your board vertically grants you access to keys that you just wouldn't be able to reach otherwise.
I use X with my thumb, F with my thumb, C, V, B, and M, all that with my thumb. It's just better because if I was on a horizontal keyboard, I wouldn't be able, I would have to reach a lot further to use that.
But more importantly, it can do wonders for your wrist.
If you really look at your wrist, unless you position very specifically to make your wrist straight, your wrist is going to be deviated a little bit towards your ulna, which is the bone beside your pinky. And in ergonomics, our goal pretty much always is to keep things neutral. So it makes sense, yes, that there would be that a slight tilt to it puts your wrist in a more neutral spot. It also, I think, is a bit more relaxed too, because the way your elbows come out, especially if you're sitting with armrests, your elbows are naturally out a bit, which means that if you're coming in straight to a mouse or a keyboard like this, your wrist has to be pointed out. But if you tilt a little bit, it just creates a straight line from your elbow down to your fingertips. So that makes a lot of sense. That would be a benefit. I do find it a little bit more comfortable too. I do find myself putting it to a bit of a slant.
So all in all, keyboard tilt isn't necessarily a bad thing. As with most things in life, a little can go a long way. And contrary to what I went into this project thinking, a super steep incline can actually up your game, as long as you orient your back and neck accordingly. So start experimenting, see what works for you. Just be cognizant of not only how you're gripping, but how you're sitting, since that stuff really matters. I've said it before, I'll say it again. Getting good is hard, but it shouldn't cause you actual physical pain. Stay safe out there. Now, I know you're all sheesh spamming, what the fuck is it? 18-year-old. Hey! Now I know you're.
Oh my glasses. Some filthy cat.
Filthy
F-wording.
normie shit, Dimitri.
COD bros they're the league normies. The controller.
Can you please put this in your interjection so I'm not the only one who everyone thinks is an elitist? Please? Can you put this? That's fucking great.